Good morning, grade fives. It is Tuesday. I hope that you all slept really well and you've already had something to eat and you are ready to start learning today. Can you believe these days are flying by? Just the other day that it was the weekend, and after today, then we're halfway through the week already. So these days are flying by, but just continue to look after yourself. And remember, and I'll say this every lesson, but if you've got any questions, please email them to grade5@worksheetcloud.com, and yeah, we'll answer any questions that you have. But are you ready to learn? Okay, let's go. Right, so today we are going to focus a little bit on inferencing. Now, I brought this up when I taught my lesson on comics. Remember, we did inferencing through comics, but I'm going to go into a little bit more detail with inferencing today, because I think that it is just such an essential skill to be able to understand how to inference, what inferencing is all about, because you inference in many components in English. Whether it's comics, whether it's poetry, whether it's comprehensions, whether it is looking at visual imagery, so anything we inference. And so I think it's quite important to actually spend some time on this particular topic. So the first thing that I want to talk about is when I think of the word inferencing, I always think of this word here, clue. So you can see this cute little picture of this man here. He says, a clue, I found a clue. Now what? Okay, it's all about clues. And so inferencing, if you ever think of a particular image to attach to the word inferencing, always think of like a detective looking for clues and solving sort of, I wouldn't say crimes, but solving or answering questions. Okay, so specifically, inferencing involves taking textual information, so information from a text of some kind, okay? Then we take prior knowledge, so knowledge and things that we've learnt. So we take what we know, we take what we read, and together we can form an inference, right? We are then inferencing. So inferencing always requires those two components, textual information plus your prior knowledge. We then combine the two and then we form an inference or a conclusion about something. So we don't just make guesses, random guesses about certain information from texts. It's also using our prior knowledge, and it's so important. Okay, now specifically, if we look at the definition of inferencing in itself, it is something that you conclude based partly on textual evidence and partly on your own knowledge. So it's making a conclusion or answering something based on evidence, so clues from the text, as well as previous knowledge. So that's why it says partly. The word partly is quite important. Part of this, together we form an inference. Okay, now how on earth do we even start by inferencing? So when we figure out information that is implied but not stated in a selection, so we inference because if there is a question based on the text and it's not that obvious, so it's not a very forward question. So for example, if I have to say to you, right, what color shirt am I wearing today? The answer is quite obvious because it's white, because you can see it. But if I say to you, based on my clothing, what do you think the weather is today where I am in the country? So you first look to see, okay, I'm wearing a short sleeve shirt, t-shirt. Then based on your knowledge, which season do we wear short sleeve t-shirts? I'm not wearing jackets or scarves. So it must be a warmer sort of temperature and warmer weather. And so it must be, the season must be summer where I am based here, or the weather for today must be really warm. And so it is, I'm not stating that the weather is warm. You've made that assumption or that conclusion based on looking at the clues, thinking about your knowledge of seasons and your knowledge of temperature and weather, and then forming a conclusion. Okay, so now let's just go through in detail. How do we inference? We must first see what the author actually tells you about the situation. So that is step one. What does the author tell us about the situation? Step two, we must then think about our own prior knowledge about the situation. So we see the clues. Well, we identify the clues, we see the clues. We then think about our knowledge about those clues or based on those clues. We then combine what the author tells us with what we already know, and we have then made an inference. And so inferencing, another word for inferencing, you know, when, and I'm sure you've heard this statement before, when they say read between the lines, it's when things are not direct, they're not obvious. You need to read between the lines, almost if there was an explanation between texts. That is what inferencing is all about. So 2 parts of inferencing is the clues from the text, the textual information, plus your knowledge, and together, that is a plane flying by, together you then form an inference. Right, so if I have to put it into a little equation, inferencing is what I read, what I know already, and it equals to what I infer. What I read plus what I know already equals what I infer. So it's always important to remember that. Right, now we're going to do a little bit of a practice. We've got a picture or a portrait of a lady. And the question says, write 6 possibilities about the lady and her life that you feel must be true. So now is the part of the lesson when if you want to pause the lesson, I'd say pause it now. Get a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil. Write down 6 possibilities about her life based on the picture. So remember, now we're looking for clues. Take the time, look at all the clues in her picture, right? Then think about those clues and then write down 6 sort of possibilities. And remember, it can be anything about her life. Okay, ready? Go. Okay, so I hope you've spent some time and you've written your 6 possibilities. If I go through this picture, so by looking at her, first of all, there is a cat on her lap and she is stroking the cat. She is playing with the cat. Now I know cats are pets, so she is an animal lover. She likes cats. I don't see any dogs, so she's a cat person and she really likes cats. I also think that she does not have very good eyesight. How do I know that? It doesn't say she doesn't have good eyesight, but I do see glasses on her book, and glasses usually imply that somebody does not have strong eyesight, so she possibly doesn't have strong eyesight. She needs glasses to read her book. Okay, it shows that there is a painting here in the background of sailing. It could be a painting. Actually, I don't think it is a painting because there are paintings there. This looks like it is a window. And the reason why I say it is a window is because you've got curtains over there. So again, do you see all the evidence? So if we have a look, so she lives somewhere by an ocean. Maybe she lives by the beach or she lives by a river. How do I know that? Because there is water, there are boats in the water. She's looking out, she can see them. And so just by looking at this picture already, I am forming these conclusions about this woman's life and about this picture of this woman's life. You see what you can gather. It's really amazing. Right, let's look at another example. Okay, so remember, what I read and what I know already is equal to what I infer. So the waves, I'm going to read a little extract and then I'm going to ask a question. The waves crashed against the beach. Thunder cracked and lightning lit the sky. The wind howled and bent trees over sideways. People put shutters on their windows, bought supplies, and were ready. Now, just that is a very short piece. And the question that I'm asking all of you, what were the people expecting? Nowhere in this piece does it outright say this and this is going to happen, or this and this is supposed to happen, and that's what the people were expecting. Doesn't tell us that. So this is where we have to infer. And when we infer, I also encourage you to draw a table that looks something like this. The first column is going to be what we read, what I read. The second is what I know already. And the third is then what I infer, what I can conclude. So let's look at some of the points of what we read. So we read that the waves crashed. We read that the wind is howled. So these are the things that are obvious that we can point out from the story. We read that the trees are bent, put shutters on windows, and people bought supplies. That is obvious. That is direct. That is what we read. Those are the clues of the text. Now, we start thinking about our knowledge. Waves crashing, wind howling. That's telling me that the weather is changing. Then trees start to bend, and then we have to put shutters on windows. Bending trees is hectic, so that's not normal. So that's all of a sudden we think, oh no, something's going to happen. So danger is on its way. Then for people to buy supplies, especially like now during lockdown, I know a lot of people around the country went and bought supplies, and that is an indication that people need to be prepared for something. And so if we think about all of those things, and we put what we've just read, what we know, and together what we can infer is that the people were expecting a hurricane or a natural disaster. Right, specifically a hurricane. Why not a volcano or anything like that? It's because we look at the evidence of the weather, waves crashing, wind howling, and so people are expecting a hurricane. And that we have inferred just by reading this little piece over here. Okay, let's look at another example. So I'm going to ask 6 questions based on this text. I'm going to read the text first, and then we're going to inference and conclude and answer the questions. Okay, so the text says, there is a group of strong men riding in a truck. They arrive at a house. One of the men is older than the rest of them. He is dressed in a suit. The rest of the men are dressed in work clothes. The man in the suit rings the doorbell. A woman answers the door. She is dressed in a uniform with an apron. She tells the man in the suit to wait a moment. Then another woman comes to the door. She is dressed in ordinary clothes. The man hands her a piece of paper which she signs. After that, the other men go into the house and start covering the furniture in sheets and blankets. Then they carry the furniture out of the house and load it onto the back of the truck. When everything is in the truck, they drive over to a new house in another part of town and unload the furniture. Okay, so step 1, always read your text fully first. And then step 2, we then look at the questions. Then after reading all the questions, so I'm only going to go through question by question. If you read all the questions first and then go back, read the text again. And if you want to sit with a highlighter and highlight sort of your clues in your text, that is what I suggest that you do. So the first question is, who are the men in the truck? Now, they don't directly tell you what those men are, what their role is in this particular story. So the men in the truck. So there is the first line, it says there's a group of strong men. So firstly, I know that they are strong. That's what they are saying. Okay, this would go in the first column. We also know that there is one of them that is older than the rest of them. And this man that is older, he is dressed in a suit, okay, and the rest of them are dressed in work clothes. So we've got some men, it's telling us one of them, they're all in a truck, one of them is older, one of them, that older man, he is wearing a suit, and the other men are dressed in work clothes. Okay, so if we stop there for a second, that is the information that we have. Then the information that we can think about, that we know, okay, so if one is dressed differently to the other and he's a little bit older, he's maybe in a higher role than the other men. Maybe he is the manager, maybe he is the person in charge, and we know that he's the person in charge because he's dressed differently. Okay, so what can we infer? Right? So who are the men in the truck? The men that are dressed in normal clothes. They are strong, so they are there to lift furniture and do heavy lifting. And the man in the suit is probably the coordinator. He's there to supervise, to make sure everything goes according to plan, because you can't lift furniture in a suit. So those are the men in the truck. Right. Question number 2. Who is the older man? Okay, so question number 2 is now specifically speaking about the older man. Again, we did partially answer it in the first question. The older man, he is dressed differently, which is what we see here. So it says he is dressed in a suit. So he is older. He's dressed in a suit. So I'm going to infer, must be a supervisor or a manager of some kind, because, and if the question says explain your answer, we say this because he is dressed in a suit, so he's not dressed in appropriate clothing in order to manage furniture and lift furniture, and he's older, so he's definitely not young, strong, and fit like the other men. Right, question number 3. Who is the woman who first answers? Okay, so now we go back to the text. We look for the clues. A woman answers the door. She is dressed in a uniform and an apron. Okay. She tells the man in the suit to wait a moment. Then another woman comes to the door. She is dressed in ordinary clothes. So who's the woman who appears first? This woman, let's look at the evidence. She's dressed in a uniform with an apron. Now, what we know, usually if you're dressed in a uniform with an apron, you those ladies are usually the helpers in the home, and helpers sometimes do have a uniform with an apron, and so that's what we know. So what we can conclude is that the woman who answers the door first must be the helper of the house or the cleaning lady, because she's wearing an apron and she's got a uniform, and so she answered the door. Question number 4. Why is the furniture being moved? Okay, so now this is a why question. So if we have a look at the evidence here, it says they're carrying the furniture out of the house, loading it back onto the truck. Then they drive over to a new house in another part of town and then unload it. So here's your keyword here, new. So that's the clues. What we can infer is usually when we do load up a truck of furniture and then we unload it, we know that possibly the people that live in this house, they're moving or they're relocating to another house. And so why is the furniture being moved? The furniture is being moved because the owners of the house, they are relocating, which means they are moving out of the house they're staying in now, and they are moving to a new house in a different part of town. Question number 5. Who is the other woman who signs the paper? So again, let's look at the clues. The other woman comes to the door. She's dressed in ordinary clothes. Okay. The man hands her a piece of paper which she signs. Right, so who is the woman? Now, because she's dressed in ordinary clothes, she's not wearing a uniform. She's not in a suit, so it doesn't show that she's needs to wear a certain dress code of some kind. Also, if she's signing, it also shows that she has some sort of importance. And so who is the other woman who signs the paper? I'm going to conclude and infer that that woman is one of the owners of the house. She lives at the house. She's a resident of the house. Because she's signing the paper, it shows that she is an authoritative figure of some kind in the house, and she's in ordinary clothes, so she definitely does live there at the house. Right. So grade 5s, I hope that today I've given you something to think about. And remember that when we inference again, it's those two components. It's looking for clues, textual information, then using our knowledge together, we can make inference. What I read, what I know together is what I infer. Right, so I do hope that you've learned lots. I'm going to continually refer to inferencing. I'm going to do quite a few lessons in the future on different ways of inferencing. We're going to look at different types of texts and continue to inference. Remember, inferencing, it is a higher order thinking skill because it does require thinking. And so, like I said to you the last time, the more we practice, the better that we become. Okay, English is all about explaining, but there's reasons for our explanations. So please, I encourage you all to do the activity that is part of this lesson. And remember, if you want to go back, watch this lesson again, pause it at the portrait of that lady and all the questions and things that we've done today. I encourage you to do so. Have a wonderful day. I will see you all tomorrow. Hakuna Matata, and be kind to one another. Bye.